Hi, everybody. I think we're going to get people coming in throughout the hour, so I don't necessarily want to waste any more time by waiting. Thank you for those who have joined. This is actually a really an interesting and important conversation that we are going to be having today. Um, Rapid DNA applications in Africa. It's something that is fairly scarce for a number of reasons, and we're very fortunate today to have three very different perspectives on this discussion. The one is a person who's using it in their laboratory. The other is a global expert who is facilitating its use in many jurisdictions. And the other is somebody who's had it and no longer has it, but wants it again. So the idea today is actually to be much more interactive than just a presentation format. We are going to hear from our three presenters. But what I would really like after that is use the majority of the time to have a Q&A session where you can put your questions in the chat and please continue to do it throughout the presentations as you think of things. And for us to really unpack how we can make better use of this technology in Africa and what some of the challenges are with regards to why its use is so limited. So, as per the poster, as many of you have seen, we are talking about emerging rapid DNA applications, specifically in our region. And when I talk about our region, I talk about Africa. And I'm Vanessa Lynch. As many of you know, I'm from DNA for Africa. I'm the director of DNA for Africa and also a consultant at GTH DNA. And I'm going to be your host today. And we're going to be exploring opportunities, challenges, policy considerations surrounding the use of rapid DNA in Africa. Interestingly enough, the session was inspired by recent conversations I had in Dubai a couple of weeks ago at the Forensic DNA Forum. And the application of rapid DNA in other jurisdictions came up in some of the presentations, as well as one of the presentations, which was quite interesting, was that CODIS FBI are now allowing the uploading of DNA profiles from a rapid DNA instrument into CODIS, which really talks to the integrity and the stability of this particular technology. So we got talking about, how we can use it more interoperably, how we can use it interregionally, and that's why I thought of having this webinar to discuss some of those considerations. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to our panel. We've got Mr. Andrew Maburi. He's the Acting Director of Forensic Services from the Uganda Police Force. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today. There he is. And Andrew is what I'd call a seasoned forensic scientist. He has over 20 years experience in the field, and he currently leads Uganda's National Forensic Services, as well as serves as the United Nations focal point on organized crime, and has really played a pivotal role in advancing forensic capacity in East Africa. So he's currently using it in his laboratory, as you'll hear from him. And we're really interested in your insights as to why you've chosen this technology, how successful it's been in its application, and what some of your future ambitions are with regards to it. We also have Kyle, and Kyle Schroeder's from GTH DNA. And he's the regional director for Europe, CIS, and Central America. And while Kyle is around today and going to be presenting, he's also on his way to Morocco. So he is going to be available for questions, but I think he was currently just going through the airport security, but he is around and we have got his presentation. And I'm really glad to have Kyle here today because he advises governments on DNA legislation, policy, and cross-border data sharing. And he specifically is supporting a number of rollouts of rapid DNA technology throughout the world. And the importance of talking to people and having people like Kyle involved is that Kyle is working in some of the migration issues in Europe, and also, as we know, because of the migration happening between the two continents, it's really important to see how we can use this technology between the two. And then finally, but not last but not least, is Innocent MacArthur, who I know most of you are familiar with. And Innocent he's the state forensic analyst in Zambia at the National Forensic Science and Biometrics Department, and a forensic DNA analyst who, as you all know, has really helped establish Zambia's first DNA laboratory, and a strong advocate for quality standards and legislative reform to strengthen forensic science and criminal justice systems in Africa. And it was quite interesting in Dubai, where Innocent was presenting there too, how strongly he was advocating for the use of rapid DNA, having had it previously and now looking to have it again. So it's a really strong panel, and I think our conversations are going to really inform us with these three different perspectives. So just to give you an overview, we're going to have three short presentations from Andrew, from Kyle, from Innocent. Each bringing their unique perspectives into the conversation and the experience with rapid DNA. Andrew, you're going to be kicking off the session, obviously sharing your insights from Uganda, where your lab is implementing it. And if you could speak to how and why you're using it, how it fits into your mainstream DNA analysis workflows, because we all know that it can't replace your mainstream DNA analysis workflows. And I think we'd also love to hear about your vision for expanding or improving its use. So let's kick off with Andrew. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for the introduction. I don't know if my slide is visible.
Yes, I can see it. Everything looks like it's working perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all, for joining us on this webinar or conference, online conference. Vanessa, thank you very much for the advocacy for DNA application in Africa, and for your work you have been doing across the globe. And also the entire team, Innocent, and the team from Zambia, and also our team that has organized this meeting. Yes, indeed, as Vanessa said, we have been using DNA technology in Uganda for quite some time. The first time we had this capability was way back in 2007, and by then we were using the 310. We moved on to the 3100 and then the 3100 XL, and now we are using the mainstream 3500. But today I would like to just talk about how we have been able to strengthen the prosecution and reporting of sexual and gender-based violence in Uganda using rapid DNA technology, but also the mainstream that we have been working, and also just trying to give you a little bit of a highlight from our use case in Uganda. Maybe a little bit of a background on what the Director of Forensic Services, where I'm a director, is. We are the East African Community Regional Forensic Referral Center, and our task is to strengthen the investigative capacity of law enforcement agencies in East Africa, of course, starting with Uganda, where we are domiciled in the Uganda Police Force, and using our capabilities to combat the increased sophistication in transnational organized crime, especially terrorism, cybercrime, and other emerging crimes. So this is what we are working on within the East African community. And also we support the YAPCO arrangement, also our colleagues in Rwanda from the Rwanda Forensic Institute, who are now doing quite a tremendous work under the YAPCO arrangement and also the AFSA therein. Maybe to talk more about what we usually deal with in Uganda. This is a little bit of our data for the scenes that we do process. This is from 2022. So you can see the areas which fall under what we can call gender-based violence will be mainly murder, attempted murder, rape being key, and also we have defilement, taken note of that one. So this constitutes about 17% of all scenes that we do process. That's in 2022. If you do compare that with 2023, you can see the defilement numbers, the defilement numbers are picking up. So this is where we have a little bit of a challenge, especially in the cases of defilement. As you understand, within the African context, defilement would usually happen within a setting of maybe known relatives, uncle, cousins. So usually the reporting and the quick processing is important to avoid delays in administration of justice, but also to avoid compromise because the victim is actually the sin themselves. So it's important that we have some way of addressing this. Of course, we do have the customary way we approach scenes, evidence response. You know, the big guns. You know, you move a van. You have got the scene of crime officers. All these are capabilities that we do deploy for the major scenes. But looking at a van like this that we do have, this van was one of the few items we were able to get together with the systems that we do have for rapid DNA. And our original idea was to also have the rapid DNA system being able to be put in one of the vans, especially when you're responding to disaster victim identification areas. But we do have the one on the top left, that is a command van, where we do think that the rapid DNA will also be able to fit those bigger vans because they are more stable platforms to move the equipment. The equipment is a little bit sensitive, and this is something we're trying to look into as well. We do also have the evidence collection kits that we do have in the one-stop centers, the safe spaces. So these safe spaces are very important for us to be able to do this kind of work. So when it comes to the sexual assault incidents, we do use this kit given to us by the government of Uganda, and when we do have the different items therein. Now, when it comes to exhibit management, the collection of the evidential material is, of course, with the soccer kits and the sexual assault kits that we do have. We have to follow through with the preservation and the storage of the evidential material, and then the analysis has to come through there. So the rapid DNA system comes into the facility, within our facility to be able to do this kind of work, but also we do have the other customary equipment, as I will show briefly. So we are aiming to bringing forensic biometrics closer to investigations. We do have a multispectral imaging platform for the latent print, but now we do have a rapid DNA analysis equipment. And for those who are not familiar, this is how it looks like in the real sense of it all. And our plan is to have it deployed at the police units and is capable of analyzing at least some good number of samples within 90 minutes. So we think that if we can improve the capacity, we can be able to do upwards of 5 samples. Currently, we can only do 1 sample for those 90 minutes, but we are looking at the rapid hit, which is doing 1 sample, but then there is a competitor product called the Andy from the US, which is capable of doing 5 samples in a similar time span. So maybe at another time, we can also look at that one, but we don't have it yet. This is the one that we do have in our facility. Within the forensic DNA lab, we are able to do DNA databasing using the autosomal short tandem repeat. And also we do casework analysis using the autosomal short tandem repeat, so YSTRs, and the haplogroups. And then we also do sequencing for identity informative SNPs, ancestry informative SNPs, phenotype informative SNPs, and the mitochondrial DNA. We are working towards the wildlife forensics and also age estimation, which we are doing the research for using the sequencing. And this facility was commissioned in 2021. Specifically, the DNA lab was commissioned in 2021, and the caseload is indicated therein. We are still undertaking some local validation for the sequencing systems because there is an issue we have identified with the INS5, especially with regard to ancestry informative SNPs and the phenotype informative SNPs, which are not very informative for the African population. So we do have a PhD student, and they're already undertaking this research. They did their presentation of methodology, and we are getting down to some bit of work in that area. To give you an indication of the laboratory consumables, these are the equipments that we do have. As you can see on the top right, you can see the INS5, the Iron Chef, and then in the background there, you can see the 3500, 2 of them. So the cost per case is round about anywhere from $400 to $1,000, depending on the number of specimens you're able to generate from a case. Talking about casework. So it's a really costly engagement, but also at the same time, when we do our budgeting, we budget for about $100,000 per quarter to be able to suffice with the laboratory consumables, because that includes the robotics, as you can see in the lower right. Those robotic platforms enable us to do the automation in order to increase our throughput. But the rapid DNA technology that we are talking about today is very efficient, making sure that we are able to turn around cases which would have otherwise taken weeks or months. And this is basically how it functions. You get a sample, have it collected on a buccal swab. There is an automated processing within the system. It's a single unit. It will generate a DNA profile, and this DNA profile can be sent for database comparison straight into our database. We do have a database that we do hold using a platform from the US called Small Pond. And then we can also do reporting very quickly. So it's a direct, simple process. Maybe to show you how the two systems would compare, using our customary way of doing our work, you would be sorry about that. You would need to start off with the DNA extraction. Once you extract your genomic DNA, you have to quantify to make sure that you have got amplifiable DNA from the extract that you do have, and also looking at the quality. Then you will have to take through your endpoint PCR, and then you do your capillary electrophoresis on the 3500. There are those who have the Sex Studio, but for us, we do have the 3500 XL. And then you do the data analysis from we use also GeneMapper IDX, and also we have the Converge platform to be able to combine what is in the INS5 and what is on the 3500. But if you are going to use the rapid DNA platform, this will be a straight from sample collection to the equipment which combines all this other work, and then straight for the analysis using the Rapid Link. There's a software called Rapid Link, which comes together with the platform. Now, these are very good for cases that we do have, like, for example, paternity, where maybe a child goes missing, and also where we have got maybe some contestations about children who are passed away and the parents are contesting, or maybe some child and family protection unit issues. But we also know that this unit is able to be applied for border control, for immigration purposes, and also for straight up databasing specimen. So if you use this platform, you are able to realize that you will have some contributions, especially on sexual and gender-based violence cases, whereby they bring in a specimen of the suspect and the victim, and that is what our idea is, to have them at the region. We have 29 policing regions where we are seeking to have these equipments deployed. There's a project we are trying to seek funding for. So deploy them at those regions so that you can quicken the generation of the profile, including those for suspects on capital offenses. Now, this innovation should be able to speed up the process and also encourage victims to report more if we are able to have quicker turnarounds, whereby a suspect can be identified in multiple incidents quickly, so we can bring them to justice quickly. I think it's a very good thing. And Vanessa talked about something to do with quality assurance. You can see the number of stages that are involved in a rapid DNA platform. It's just basically one single step, taking the sample. So you don't have to struggle so much with so many other intermediary steps. If you can validate the single step, making sure that you take the right amount and be able to generate profiles which have been validated on the system, because the system does on platform validation straight into the database, I think this would be a wonderful thing. And of course, in the back end, you will have experts to be able to look at the profiles once they come through. So we are looking at this impact and saying, look, this system definitely will give us faster processing times. This one, there's no doubt about that, especially for gender-based violence cases. Of course, then the reporting rates will improve, strengthening prosecution, because the prosecutors now will be saying the person was presented before this, and in the rooms where we're going to put the rapid DNA system, we also propose to have cameras in there. So you have a camera, somebody is brought in, and then an interview is done, sample taken, and then we're able to generate a profile within 90 minutes. This definitely, in turn, will create a deterrence to any other potential offenders, knowing that these people are being prosecuted at such a quick pace. So the others who would wish to do something similar will think twice. And then, of course, there's resource optimization. Because remember, currently, we have to transport this across the country. Uganda, corner to corner, you're looking at anywhere from 400 to 500 kilometers. So looking at that distance of 500 kilometers, vis-a-vis generating a profile in 90 minutes, you are able to have some resources saved in there. And of course, the trust in the justice system will be something that we envisage to reap out of this. Already we are seeing some bit of improvement with the current platforms, but if we can deploy more of these platforms, because we only have one, we believe that this would be something that we can quickly achieve in the short term and the medium term. So in maximizing the potential of the rapid DNA, coming straight from the instruments, putting in the database, and making sure that the experts can look at the profiles will give us better investigative follow-ups and better prosecution evidence in the courts of law. We believe that that really works across the entire chain. Maybe to look at it from the other perspectives for those who may not be engaged in gender-based violence issues, the rapid DNA technology just accelerates everything. The people within the lab who process agent samples, whenever we have an agent sample for us, that's the go-to machine. Even the person with limited DNA experience, we just tell a technician and say, get the sample, get it in, especially for reference samples. That is a clear one. But for casework samples, it is something that we are looking into to make sure that we are able to optimize our sample inputs for the rapid DNA casework. Of course, we shall get mixed DNA profiles, and we shall have to look at them for interpretation. Now, at the police station where we hope to deploy these systems, and even within our vans if possible, we shall be able to generate investigative leads quicker and also identify suspects more quickly. Ultimately, my original idea was that this equipment would be very good for disaster victim identification and also for issues of human trafficking, especially at the border, where we have big challenges. As a coordinator for the UN Transnational Organized Crime Convention in Uganda, I see that this is an existential threat when it comes to human trafficking and migrant smuggling. Children are being smuggled across borders, and people say, oh, this is my child, but somebody is being trafficked or smuggled, depending on the purpose thereof. Mass casualties, we have had massive mass casualties, especially when it comes to bus road traffic accidents, very prevalent in Uganda. I know our colleagues in the neighborhood in Kenya have got some serious issues with some mass graves they discovered recently. But I am saying that it is important that we develop this capacity for Africa, because whenever we have mass casualties, we call in Interpol and we call in other agencies. But if a country has maybe 2 or 3 units, I have seen this being used massively in Ukraine. Ukraine is using it in their current state because they have so many casualties and they don't have time to build labs. But it helps them to identify unknown human remains, and then they're able to mark the graves. And later they will be able to use this data to reunite the families. Now, for us in Uganda, we are looking at creating safer environments for investigation of SGBV. So this is a prototype of a safe space we are trying to construct for this for the different regions where we want to put reporters and survivors of gender-based violence. So when they come to report, we have 2 sides of the dormitories down here on the left and the right, ladies and male and female. So they're able to stay. But in this same facility right at the core is where we can put the rapid DNA system. So we're having these discussions to create these safe spaces, but core to this safe space is to put the rapid DNA system there to make sure that we are able to collect the evidential material at source quickly and generate the profiles. So ultimately, what are our lessons learned from using this rapid DNA analysis in our facility? We need to create awareness among the policymakers. This is very important. The policymakers need to understand that there is a new technology out there to support the frontline forensic practitioners. This is very key. But something else recently I have been grappling with colleagues in law enforcement, we have been having a lot of theft of animals. Now, in Uganda, maybe in other parts of Africa, it's important that we need to develop other applications for this capacity, not only for human identity, HID work, but I think bovine STR is an area we need to focus on when it comes to this area. It is very important that we focus on this area. Why? We are growing agriculture and we are also transforming our economies. So it's important that maybe this is an area we need to develop other application areas. The other area we need to think about for rapid DNA is that it will enhance our oversight. Oversight is very difficult within the forensic area when you have different practitioners spread all over different areas, or maybe different activities happening across the value chain. But by cutting out the transport and so many other things, I believe rapid DNA will be a game changer in making sure that oversight across the entire value chain can quickly be realized through a single platform for analysis. So I thank you very much, dear listeners. This is all for God and my country. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. It's wonderful to see. I've never visited your laboratory in person, and it's something that I hope to do this year. But it's wonderful to see the progress that you're making and the adaptation that's happening, and certainly your insights with regards to how rapid DNA applications can be more fully utilized. So I'm looking forward to the Q&A session where I think we can really delve into some of the why you feel it's limited in other countries, because we can clearly see from your presentation why it's been so beneficial. Let's park those questions for now, and people that are listening, if you have any questions for Andrew, before you forget them, please post them in the chat and I will look at them at the end of all three presentations. So going from an operational laboratory with both processing capacity as well as using rapid DNA in East Africa, which Andrew has presented. We're now going to hear from Kyle, who's going to give us a global perspective. And I think it's always good to have some kind of perspective as to how it's being used elsewhere, and the adaptivity in our own region. So let's listen to Kyle for the next 10 minutes and just get his insights into what those global perspectives are. Thanks very much. We can't hear. I think there's an issue with the sound.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyle Schroeder from GTH-DNA. I'm going to talk about rapid DNA and current global policy trends and some of its applications around the world to give an insight on how rapid DNA is being used and what that might look like more of in the future going forward. So in order to talk about the current trends in rapid DNA around the world, we have to start with how it's being used in the US. So you already have a few states using rapid DNA for reference sample applications, meaning they are testing persons when they come into the booking stations, and they're uploading into the database and it's being stored there. You have this new application emerging, which I'll get to in the next slide, thanks to the FBI's recent announcement of a rule change. This new application is testing casework samples on rapid DNA and uploading against the state database, and in the future the national database for searching crime scenes against the database program. 6 states are already doing this in some fashion. That includes Arizona, Missouri, Kentucky, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Oklahoma. And now we have Pennsylvania joining as the 7th state, installing 15 rapid DNA machines, which is the biggest installation of these units ever. The reason why is this expanding is because the FBI recently announced earlier this year in January that they are going to amend the quality assurance standards on rapid DNA in the U.S. to allow samples tested on rapid DNA machines to be uploaded and searched against CODIS, the National DNA Database System, which means now rapid DNA can be used for reference sample and casework, and you can get that dual use out of it and upload it against the CODIS National DNA Database System to get a expedited 90-minute searching result. This is a huge advancement, though, and this means, when North America, you're going to see an explosion of rapid DNA with this rule change in ways that we have never seen before. And quite possibly, you'll see the world follow suit here as well. Rapid DNA is also used in the U.S. at its borders, and that's a new frontier that's emerged over the last 5 years, using rapid DNA to verify familial relationships. The US has been using DNA at its borders for some time, since 2005 specifically, when legislation mandated it under the DNA Fingerprint Act. So traditional buccal swabs were taken from persons detained under federal authority and are uploaded to the database system in certain circumstances. And the migration crisis in 2019 and beyond saw a huge demand for that need in DNA. But they encountered also a unique situation where under previous policies, family units were often released into the U.S. while awaiting immigration hearings, which meant that a lot of families were arriving at the U.S. border in suspicious circumstances where authorities doubted the relationship between the parents and the child. And so they wanted to verify the relationships between the parent and the supposed child. And rapid DNA is perfect for that. So the U.S. government, specifically CBP, Department of Homeland Security, they engaged a pilot project bringing rapid DNA to 11 locations and eventually 18 to test those familial relationships. And that program was very successful, and over almost about 2,000 relationships were tested, and with 13% of the relationships being determined false because of rapid DNA, which was a great success story for this application here. Stories are pretty crazy and coming from the front there, with ranging from fraud to possible human trafficking, as you can imagine. But also the authorities saw, once rapid DNA was deployed, they saw a strong deterrent value, meaning once it was present and people knew about rapid DNA being deployed, a lot of families, the number of families, fake families showing up at the border dropped substantially. So the policy goal of bringing rapid DNA is to identify false claims between family units, false family units, and also to identify human trafficking. So with the traditional and the rapid DNA applications, you have criminal threat screening and also relationship verification. So that dual combo is what the U.S. government is using to some degree, and I think that's going to be ramping up soon here with recent executive orders from the current U.S. President Donald Trump. In Europe, you don't see rapid DNA at its borders in the ways that you see in the US. I mean, you have European countries using rapid DNA to supplement laboratory workflow and used for high-profile cases. But at the border, you don't see it in the same way. The EU is already adjusting its migration and asylum systems to better address the migrant crisis, including expanding existing biometrics like fingerprints and facial imaging. But they didn't bring DNA or rapid DNA to that expansion, and I think you might see that someday, at least in limited pilot projects and areas where verifying familial relationships is an important objective and need there. An example of what some of those rapid DNA applications might look like would be a pilot program at like Lampedusa, Lesbos, Ceuta, so maybe Spain, Italy, Greece, other areas where there are a lot of arrivals of migrants from parts of the world. Rapid DNA probably wouldn't be a blanket requirement. Even traditional DNA testing wouldn't be a blanket requirement. It could be used in a way that's a secondary screening requirement when a flag comes up about a family relationship. Possible human trafficking or a fake family relationship claim. And also, once the data is taken, having it retained only for a limited period of time, I think, is a key policy element, and maybe even auto expungement of the profile and sample after that person or family is granted asylum or legal status. I think that's an important element to ensure privacy and ensure people have trust in the system. I do think someday, as Europe evaluates whether to bring DNA to its border enforcement and migration processes, you might see the sharing of those DNA profiles that come out of that process, whether they be rapid DNA profiles or traditional DNA, within the familial verification context. So rapid DNA, those profiles could be shared under a non-criminal sharing program, whether that be via Interpol's iFamilia DNA database or just via, existing sharing protocols via Prüm and so forth. And even someday you might see traditional DNA sampling being used, and perhaps that's used in criminal applications, and that could be shared via Prüm's existing criminal DNA databasing sharing system. You already see rapid DNA in Europe being used in vans and mobile applications. The French gendarmerie uses rapid DNA to some degree in vans, and they deploy that to certain areas within France, but also around the world to some of their territories where laboratory capacity doesn't exist. So it's a great way to supplement where laboratory capacity is lacking. Perhaps, but you may see that these rapid DNA response team concepts applied to the border scenario in Europe. So they might be jointly financed by the European Union and operated and managed by Frontex. And these rapid DNA machines could be deployed to hotspots when conditions require at the border, or even to crime scenes or high-profile cases, or even mass disasters. With the FBI's amendment of the quality assurance standards to come this year, these machines can now be used for dual purposes, both reference sample and also crime scene sample applications. So it's a great way to get more use out of the same technology. In Latin America and other areas, rapid DNA is being used as an alternative to the DNA laboratory. So instead of smaller countries with limited budgets establishing their own DNA laboratory and database programs with traditional workflow, they just buy a rapid DNA machine and start from there, which is better than having no database or DNA program at all. Guyana is doing this, Belize is doing this, Barbados and other countries in the Caribbean are considering doing this. And it's a great way for countries who are looking to establish some DNA capacity to establish at least something. And of course, rapid DNA with the dual purpose, dual use, and the ability to now have casework and reference samples uploaded to CODIS means you can get both. You can do both with rapid DNA machines. In some parts of Latin America, specifically in Argentina, Mendoza, which is a state there, rapid DNA is being used as a way to supplement laboratory workflow. And this is something you see in other parts of the world as well, like Europe, I think in some parts in the US. So this is a great way for laboratory programs, well-functioning, well-regulated, to tackle backlogs, to supplement where they need extra capacity for high-profile cases or mass disasters. It's a great way to bring extra capacity for certain circumstances. So what about Africa? How could this look in Africa? When I hear about rapid DNA in Africa, I hear generally two concepts be mentioned. One is the leapfrog model, and one is this decentralization model. The leapfrog is similar to what Guyana and Belize are doing, which is in areas and countries where budgets are more limited and traditional DNA capacity doesn't exist. Perhaps it makes sense to simply bypass that workflow and use rapid DNA, again with its dual purpose, to establish some DNA capacity. And from there, you can look at then creating a database program. So rapid DNA is uploading profiles to that database and is serving as the baseline functionality for DNA capacity in that country. It's a much cheaper way to go. In the initial instance, over time, it may not be as cost effective, but at least it's a way to establish something. The second model of decentralization, it's sort of self-explanatory. It's just the idea that, in bigger countries or bigger areas and regions where some DNA capacity in the traditional workflow sense does exist, using rapid DNA to spread capacity throughout the country to reach broader areas of that region or country is a great way to also supplement capacity. So it's not replacing traditional workflow, it's just supplementing it throughout the country in a cost-effective and strategic way. I think some of the policy recommendations that are coming out are more universal and less Africa-specific per se, but I think in this context, a couple come to mind that I think of, which is the importance of A swab, B swab sampling. Even if you have a rapid DNA machine and using for reference and casework applications, it's good to still take one sample that's dedicated just for the traditional workflow, or even as a backup. That allows your traditional experts to verify the sample or verify the rapid DNA process. Perhaps your country doesn't allow rapid DNA to be used in court yet. The results, so you always want to have that sample taken for the traditional workflow. With the FBI, at least in the US, updating the quality assurance standards to allow crime scene database searching with rapid DNA technology, I think it makes a lot of sense for countries to have that in mind, both applications in mind when they're adopting or designing their programs. it's you want to get the most use out of your machines. So if you're gonna be purchasing Rapid DNA or want to establish your own program with Rapid, keep that in mind. You want to use that for both reference and crime scene. And lastly, even if you have a laboratory and you think you don't need Rapid DNA, there are cases where over time backlogs occur. You have also mass disaster scenarios. You have high profile cases where you could use a sample or you could use a profile generated much more quickly. It doesn't hurt to have that supplementary laboratory capacity. Lastly, one thing that I think is an exciting area, and I was mentioning this earlier with the European DNA applications. Africa plays a key role in collaboration efforts with migration and the European Union. You bring rapid DNA, even traditional DNA, to some of the workflows in countries where migrants depart from. Perhaps the European Union and North African countries, or even non-North African countries in Central and South Africa, they can partner with the European Union and they can help verify some of those familiar relationships before they depart. Or maybe they help perform some of the biometric testing for the European Union, and DNA plays a role in that to some degree. Just a thought for the future. And I know that there are a lot of EU funding mechanisms open right now, and I've seen that they are looking for partnerships in this area for internal security, migration and asylum processing. There might be partnerships in avenues to use biometrics and specifically DNA, rapid DNA, in partnerships with the European Union. And that's something I think authorities in Africa could consider as ways to help establish their programs, supplement them, get them accelerated moving forward. So I think in summary, rapid DNA is going to explode more this year than ever with the FBI's updated quality assurance standards. You already have 7 states doing crime scene sample testing on statewide databases. I think you're going to see many more states joining that and building their own rapid DNA programs so they can take advantage of their state programs, but also the national database programs under the new FBI rules. So I think Africa, it's a natural next step for them to consider rapid DNA, whether it be to supplement current workflow or to maybe do that leapfrog model, jump past traditional workflow and bring at least some rapid DNA capacity to your country, even if you don't have the traditional workflow. Some is better than none at all is sort of our thinking, my thinking, and I encourage countries and jurisdictions to consider that. So this is the year, this is the time. Rapid DNA is going to explode. We are happy to help provide more information about that as you go through that process. But that's definitely the future and the way forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. It's always good to get an outside perspective. And I agree, Kyle, that I think this year we're going to certainly see rapid DNA rapidly sort of an exponential use of it. So I think in the interest of time, because I see we're already at 3:45 and Innocent doesn't actually have a presentation but wants to really speak more to it, I'm going to kickstart the questions with asking directly to Innocent because to close sort of the speaker portion of it, I think, Innocent, if you could just reflect on Zambia's previous experience with rapid DNA and how the absence of it is impacting your current capacity. So that'll be the first question. And then you might want to just follow that and touch on why you feel Zambia needs rapid DNA and how it could complement your current casework. And because you've had the benefit of having it and not having it and the opportunity of re-implementing it, what you would do differently. So perhaps you could kick off with those 3 aspects for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. So I was just speak to the experience that we've had when it comes to the use of rapid DNA. Basically, in the absence of the backup or the routine methods of DNA analysis. This is using the standard routine equipment. So in 2018, that's the time Zambia leapfrogged the DNA analysis using the rapid DNA 200. So the rapid DNA hit 200 was the equipment that we used in Zambia, and I was privileged to be the person, one of the two people who are using this equipment. However, and we could resolve cases that were of single source and perfectly and in good time. The equipment was using 7 samples, including the positive and negative control. So the challenge we were having is that where we have only one sample to analyze, we have to wait until we have 7 samples of single source. So I'm glad that now they have a system where you can just use a single sample because you don't need to wait to batch up the samples. Immediately you can run that one single sample. So that's a great plus, and I hope it was most likely established because of the feedback from customers like who had that experience like mine. However, we need so that's where we are. We resolved those cases. However, it was challenging to resolve samples that have mixed with mixed samples. Mostly these are samples from crime scene and the samples of poor quality that have degraded DNA. So those samples, even outside the rapid DNA, even in the normal platforms we use, they are still challenging samples. So that's what we have. Those were just common challenges, and I know they've upgraded the system, and this sensitivity has been, I'm sure, upgraded. So this system was decommissioned. That's why Zambia stopped using it, because it was decommissioned. Not that because it was not performing properly, no, because it was decommissioned by the manufacturers. So we didn't get the upgraded system. Now that we have, and the other thing is we were using this in the leapfrog manner where it was not supported by the traditional methods. Now that we have a traditional equipment which we use, I strongly feel that rapid DNA analysis is needed. One, there are instances where the police or law enforcement have suspects who are in custody, and we have generated the DNA from the crime scene samples. When they send, so first of all, they send the crime scene sample to us, then it takes time for them when they have suspects to get the samples and send to the lab. When they send those samples to the lab, they have to go through the normal queue of analysis. So you find that they send the samples, it will take 3-4 weeks for us to finish that case. However, if the police are empowered, for example, with the rapid DNA analysis, they don't need to send. Immediately they have the suspect, they can analyze the samples immediately. And if they have to release the suspect, exonerate the suspect, the suspect will be released immediately. Those they have to arrest will be arrested. And probably because the officers who are using the rapid DNA would not have the lab expertise, then they can send the sample to the lab where we can now do the normal process and compare. But by that time, they will have this lead. So without repeating what other speakers spoke about, I'll just say it is a very great tool. And in Zambia, we need it, especially the one with single sample analysis, because it will help law enforcement. And we need this to have the law enforcement in all the divisions, which are provinces, to have this. It will help resolve reference samples quickly. Yeah, so I don't want my scientists to waste a lot of time running reference samples when there's an equipment which can easily do that work with the quality assurance it has. Thank you.
Thanks, Innocent. And it's interesting to see that, you know, that you've recognized in terms of your previous experience as to what you need now. And I certainly hope that you are able to get it, and I have no doubt you will, because your laboratory seems to be able to get ahead with a lot of things. I think you've raised a very important question, and perhaps Andrew can answer this one, because you're also working in a police environment. And that is, do we trust the police enough to do this? Now, we're hearing that one of the advantages of rapid DNA is that it can be done on site. It doesn't need forensic analysts rather. So it makes it much more accessible. And we obviously regionally, and I mean this, throughout our continent, there is a mistrust of the police. Have you encountered this? Are you doing it as scientists, or have you given over this job to the police in order for them to be able to do it, on site or at borders, etc.? I'd like to hear your response, and maybe after you, if Kyle is around, I know he had to board a plane. Maybe he can also tap in and see if this has come up as an issue. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I don't know whether Kyle is still online. Kyle, are you still there?
I am here.
Oh, yes, Kyle, thank you very much for your presentation, and also to Innocent. Indeed, Vanessa asked a very critical question, but in Uganda, we're trying to use the decentralized approach, as you pointed out. We are way past leapfrogging anything, but we want to decentralize. Now, the core question of trust, I think it's something that we need to all look into. So earlier I had mentioned that we are trying to set up these units at the region. Now, within the room that we're going to put these equipment, we are putting them together with our cameras. Now, we have a CCTV network for the police that helps us monitor different aspects of different communities. But we also, that CCTV network also monitors our own policemen within the police station. So that's where we're going to put this capability, where it's being monitored 24/7 by these cameras. Not only that, the system cannot work in isolation. So what we're trying to do is to yoke it to other platforms. For example, we have a case management platform. We have got a laboratory information management system that we are trying to finalize implementation. Hopefully this financial year, we shall be able to finalize this. Now, when the two come together, you are able to have traceability. So once somebody has been arrested, we record the details of the individual electronically. Then we go ahead and take their biometrics also electronically. So that's why we need the two parts. So we take the fingerprints, and also we take the facial. Now, from the biometric platform, unfortunately, I'm not able to demonstrate that to you, although I'm sitting in the office. On the biometric platform for the fingerprints and the facial, there is an area where we have already coded in for DNA ID. Now, that coded area for DNA ID is where we input a barcode, because the particular sampling kits that come with the rapid hit system come with a barcode. So we want to yoke that barcode onto the person sampling. So we also need to take a photograph. So we say, take the photograph. And also that's why we are talking about the one-stop centers. If in the one-stop center you have got cameras and everything is visible to any other person, maybe the prosecutor or even the trial fact, the judges, everybody can see how the sample was collected. And then you can trace it onto the equipment via the logs and then the profile. So we believe that traceability will be able to build the trust, because yes, we know that there could be some other nefarious actors within the police force who may seek to try and see whether they can try to push in something which is not proper. But we are also thinking about how we can make it visible, traceable, and also trusted by the masses. That question came up actually, indeed, Vanessa, from one of my supervisors when I pitched this idea. They said, are you sure we can trust some of our people down there? And I was like, yes, we can trust them, only that, yes, trust is good, but control is better. So it's better we control the access to the platforms and make sure that we are able to see whatever is happening. And the beauty about the rapid hit, which I also saw from their software, you are able to monitor the equipment remotely, miles away, because it's geotag. It's geotag, so you are able to monitor what is happening in real time.
Yes.
So if you couple that with the CCTV, then that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And it's good to hear, as you say, the integration of forensic disciplines is also something that we really do have to look towards. DNA is not the only solution. I think there has to be a lot of, as you say, looking forensically, pathology, evidence. There's so many different factors involved, and I think that does also assist with it when you are looking at a multidisciplinary approach.
Vanessa, Vanessa, just to jump in there,
yes.
Incidentally, you have reminded me, one of the areas we're trying to place this equipment is at the mortuary.
Okay.
So because we have a lot of unidentified human remains. So one of the low-hanging fruits we want to start with is at the mortuary. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. And I can see there are a few people who are working in pathology in this meeting too. So please put your questions up there because we would like to hear from you. Kyle, if you're still there, have you had any experience of a distrust in the system as far as police are not analysts using it? Is there anything that you'd like to add to perhaps Andrew said?
No, I haven't experienced any sort of distrust in the system. People in the United States are using rapid DNA in that way, where police officers are deputized or allowed to put samples into the machines themselves. So you don't have to be an expert. I'm sure the process has control as well, and I love Andrew's idea of how to impose that control and verification of the sample chain of custody. But I don't think I've ever heard of an instance of that being a problem around the world and in the US. So I think a system is necessary, but I think police officers, non-forensic people can be trusted to do the job.
Mm. Yes, I think that, as I said, regionally, I think there are different issues, and I certainly think that Andrew's suggestions are ones that can be incorporated in any event for all type of forensic processing, not only with DNA. It's probably a good thing generally. We've got a great question from somebody in the audience, and that's from Ahmed Samar. And basically, he's a master's student in forensic odontology. Welcome. Originally from Sudan, currently in Kenya, displaced in Kenya due to the war. And I'm sure that there are many people that are similar to yourself. Um, Ahmed is interested in rapid DNA technology and its application in emergency and disaster victim identification, which we haven't really gone into to a large extent. I know that Kyle, you've touched on it as well, and we've spoken more from Innocent and Andrew's perspective of, like a forensic processing. So given his current, Ahmed is saying, given my current situation and the challenges of accessing local training, could you advise on international programs or platforms that offer practical training in rapid DNA and emergency forensic identification for students in crisis regions like mine? Interesting question. I don't know if any of us, our presenters, can answer that, but it would be good, maybe you can each give, I can see you both put your cameras on, if you can each give maybe a couple of minutes answer to Ahmed, and if you want to just sort of look at the chat, you'll be able to see the question more fully. Andrew, do you want to start? I can't hear you, Andrew, you're on mute.
Sorry. I was saying that I don't think you'll find an international program per se, but the only place where I see that they're using rapid DNA extensively is in Ukraine. And
Yes.
everybody knows for a reason, because you're having mass casualties in a war. There are no people to come and identify the bodies. So the easiest thing is do the DNA and then do the tagging and then bury the body, so that later when somebody comes up and says, oh, I lost a relative somewhere, say, just give us a sample. Then we can quickly run through and we shall be able to trace that back. I don't know whether the ICMP in Kosovo, I don't know, because they did something within the area of Srebrenica, but ICMP should be one area somebody should consider. The International Commission for Missing Persons. I don't know, Vanessa, if you've got links in there. That's an area where I think, yeah.
Yes, I think that Dr. Kamal Abubakar, and it's a shame, I don't think he's here today. If he is, please let me know if you are here, because I know that you'd have something to say to this. But he runs Gesimp in Libya, and I think that's what they were dealing with it. But I think they had a combination of both normal analysis and rapid DNA. But Kyle, maybe you, if you've got time, just to chip in there. Although maybe you can speak to what that entails, because I mean, as far as I understand it, the training and the application is actually relatively simple.
Very simple.
Yeah, no, I actually, funny enough, was going to say almost exactly what Andrew said. It's Ukraine. Look to Ukraine. They're using it in that exact way. However, I will add that we hosted a in-depth practical webinar on rapid DNA training for some people in Europe and Poland, actually. And it was provided by the Global Justice and Forensic Center, FIU, out of Florida. They do some training on rapid DNA in both reference and casework sample scenarios. So that's something that I think Vanessa, we could arrange something like that for this area and partner with Andrew and others, and maybe even bring in Ukraine and
Yeah.
for sure.
Let's do that. And if you do have that link to or sort of information, Carl, would you mind just posting it in the chat in any event? I think there's another great question here from Jessica Ritchie. Thank you, Jessica. How will potential issues such as contamination be dealt with, especially if a leapfrog approach, like Andrew suggested, or Carl suggested actually, is taken and collection is being undertaken by people who are not used to dealing with DNA? So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I know we and maybe Innocent, you can also add your point here. I know that a lot of countries they use it sort of as a as a starting point, and then there's often a confirmation sample that's taken thereafter. It's more just as a quick process. I don't know if this approach is taken, and I certainly know with reference sample, I mean with samples, you never ever put it in a rapid instrument unless you have two. You don't use your only sample in a rapid instrument. That much I do know. But in terms of reference samples, where you obviously can get another reference sample, maybe Innocent as a scientist, you can tell what happens when contamination occurs. What does it look like, and how do you avoid it?
Thank you, Vanessa. So yes, indeed, human containment of human DNA as it relates to contamination is a very difficult thing, which even trained scientists actually they fail to contain fully. So, but for reference samples, contamination is not an issue, like you rightly said. When there's a contamination, you can always get to get another sample. So there will always be a swab A and B, which you can do. You can run to confirm. Because when there's a contamination, it will flag, it will give you a mixed profile. So you can just repeat and run the sample. I know, of course, it will add to the cost. However, that's why in Zambia, I think what we want to do ourselves is that this equipment will strictly be used for investigations, so that we even rule out the issues of trust for the police. The police will do this for investigations. Once they have like a screening tool, once they have the actual suspect, then they can collect a sample and send to the main laboratory for analysis. So that way you have two tests done on a single sample. So it will be used that, but it will fast track the way police are investigating cases. It will fast track the way people who are exonerated are released from custody. In Africa, this is what we should not run away from. People are arrested before investigations are fully concluded. So, and those people tend to remain in police custody for a longer period of time. But the use of rapid DNA, if a case relates to human ID and they can easily be exonerated using DNA, this is a game changer. And I like the idea of having a single sample analysis DNA analyzer. For the police, I can assure you, I know issues of trust will be there, but there will be a safeguard where they have to send now the actual sample to the lab, and then the laboratory will do the analysis. So that's how we intend to decentralize or incorporate with specific samples in mind as we triage the cases. Thank you.
Interesting. And just while you're there, Innocent, because I know that you and I have been working on policy, and we're looking at policy in Zambia and how you're going to introduce the regulation of a DNA database and DNA casework. Do you see rapid DNA as requiring the same amount of policy or the same amount of regulation, or do you see it differently to your mainstream DNA analysis? Do you see the two differently? Would you treat them differently?
I think the policy towards DNA in Zambia, I think it's not, we don't want to treat it differently. Anyway, even if it's rapid DNA, it's DNA analysis, it falls within the same. The technology has improved, it has been validated for forensic work, and the other countries or jurisdiction, they are using it to resolve crime. So it will not have a standalone regulations per se. It will be incorporated within the the forensic DNA analysis regulation. So it will be covered. However, just the manner in which, just the internal policies, the manner in which we use the technology. Otherwise, it's a standard technology. The only thing I see the problem with policies, if, for example, if an investigator who is not a scientist does the case, a DNA case, do they then go to court and present that evidence? If they go to court and present that, they will present it as what? Will they be considered as expert witnesses in DNA analysis or just general investigation? So those are the really like policies that we need to look at, specific to rapid DNA analysis and the categories of people who are using the analysis. However, the rapid DNA analysis in a forensic laboratory where they are trained scientists, it's the same. We take it as though it's just the normal routine equipment that we are using. We just need to think around if it's done by a non-scientist and they have to present the DNA evidence in court, do they present it as laymen or as expert witnesses? So those are the issues probably that would speak specifically to rapid DNA analysis.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it should just be as DNA analysis, the way we use this, the equipment, the routine equipment. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if Andrew or Kyle have got anything to add, if you've seen a different policy approach to rapid DNA, or if, as Innocent has said, it will fall under the same, auspices as DNA legislation with regards to the normal forensic DNA analysis processes. Do you see it differently in countries with no forensic DNA laboratory, and if they just used rapid DNA, could you foresee them doing it without policy?
I think the policy will always be required. And I think, as Innocent pointed out, it may not diverge so much from what we are currently doing. The only thing which becomes very important is the upstream before the sample introduction into the system, because the system pretty much does its own run and has its own onboard validation. But before you bring the sample on board, I think that's where the issue is, because of the speed at which you're going to generate the profiles. And as Innocent pointed out, there will always be trust issues within the African context. It's not the same as Kyle said within the US and other areas. But here, everybody will wonder, how did it get there? So we need to deal with the upstream issues. So once we deal with the upstream issues by policy, by making sure that we have clear oversight, I do not envisage any other divergence from the current way we are doing the autosomal STR, and I think it can only get better. That's my view, and also strengthen policy per se.
Yes, no, I agree. Thank you. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost Kyle because he's lost Wi-Fi, and I know that he's traveling, so that's fine if he can log back on. But there's another question here, again from the same person, and going back to the reference samples versus crime scene samples. The question here is, how is that useful for criminal investigations when they cannot do mixed complex samples? Would that mean it has limited applicability for criminal investigations? The answer is yes. Rapid DNA does have limited applicability, and that's exactly why it doesn't replace standard DNA processing in a forensic laboratory. It's much better to have both, but there's an application, as Innocent spoke about, where they require quick identification of a particular person, or in the case of trafficking, to reference samples, is that in fact the child of the person purporting to say they are the father or the mother of that particular child. And now that the technology is improving, they're also showing that it can be done in respect of some crime scene samples if they want quick identification in respect of a crime scene. But my point was that you don't use your only crime scene sample on a rapid instrument, because if it is a difficult sample, you are going to want to use the capability of the standard processes to analyze that particular sample. So Andrew, Innocent, I don't know if you want to, as the scientist.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to that. I think it was Jessica. Jessica, thank you for that question. I think it was a research done by the Houston University Forensic Science. They did a study and demonstrated that it's actually possible to use the rapid DNA for casework samples, but you have to be very careful with the validation process. If you're going to use it for casework samples, you have to be very careful. You can actually use it for bone analysis as well. They demonstrated that very well. that you can actually use bone analysis and also do some casework. But just like any other scientific process, you don't throw your eggs in one basket. Even with the standard equipment that we use, we don't use, unless you must. But in any case, if you have a very complex case, you wouldn't want to just throw everything to the rapid DNA. You would want to, take your time. But reference sample, as Innocent pointed out and Vanessa earlier, with the reference sample, you can always go back and get another sample. So that sample is quite enormous. But I wouldn't like to say, yes, Jessica, I'm going to look for that study and maybe try to highlight it. I am trying to recall where I found it. But that study was quite very, very important for us to understand that it is possible. That's why we are also doing our own in-house studies to see, is it possible that we can try to use some casework? There's some casework which is direct, where you see a blood spot on an evidential sample, and it's very clear. You are almost sure that you will probably pick a single source DNA profile, a single spot there, and it's visible. But where you're dealing with invisible stains, saliva, and maybe some semen and other things which are more complex, I don't think you would go for the rapid. You would want to use the rapid for the reference samples and then try to use the more customary approach when you're dealing with casework. So your question of whether it's applicable for casework, I think we're going to get there sometime soon. That's what I'm looking at. And I think it wasn't for this rapid hit from Thermo Fisher. The study for Houston was done on the Andy. And they showed, it was done on the Andy. I do remember. I'm going to look for that paper. Thank you.
Carl, I think
sure.
if you're back, are you there to add in? I know that you wanted to add something. If you're back,
Yes,
Carl.
yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry, Vanessa. I was just going to say that, with concerns about handling DNA samples and non-expert people processing them and bringing them to the laboratory and putting in the rapid DNA potentially, I think that it would fall under normal chain of custody procedures. So, you wouldn't change that for rapid DNA. It would still be the same as it exists for DNA, your traditional DNA workflow. And I know that varies per country. Some countries allow police officers to touch DNA, some countries don't. But rapid DNA would have to fall to some degree in that framework. And I don't think we want to advocate for anything different. We want to ensure the chain of custody is proper.
Thank you. I think one of the key and always a question that comes up, and Andrew, you'll probably be able to answer this most effectively, is what is the cost benefit outlook? Now I'm talking about low resource settings, and many countries in our region do battle with funding, specifically of late, where a lot of funding has been withdrawn, as we know, and administrations, because they've lost a lot of funding, are having to focus on humanitarian and health issues. So, forensics has really kind of fallen sort of down the feeding chain, so to speak, in terms of priorities. So we know that this is more expensive, and maybe all three of you, if you've got a quick minute or two, can give your viewpoint of the cost benefit, when it's useful, what those sort of costs look like, and what can we learn from labs who've already tried it. Maybe we can just go, Kyle, Andrew, Innocent, in case Kyle drops off, if Kyle's still there. If you can give some insight into this sort of the cost of it and why it's still useful, albeit it's more expensive.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Rapid DNA is definitely more expensive in the long term because the sample cost to run is more expensive, but the initial cost to set it up versus traditional is way cheaper. So it's not a replacement for a traditional laboratory. It's just a way to get something started if you have no lab at all. And it's also a way to supplement for samples that do need that higher priority, extra cost, extra analysis, extra, accelerated time. You can't compare apples to oranges. It's different. It has value in and of itself for an addition, but can also be used as a standalone in some scenarios where the traditional laboratory workflow, it's just never going to come. You at least can get some DNA capacity with rapid DNA.
Thanks, Kyle, and safe travels. I'm sure that you're hanging on by a thread there. So if we don't hear from you again, thank you so much for being here today and for your insights. I'll share if the website that Carl runs, and at the end of this chat, and if anyone wants to ask him any more questions or get any more of his insights, I know he'd be happy to answer them. So if we don't hear, safe travels. Andrew, do you want to add on to that? Are you muted? You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think the issue of the cost benefit is something that I grappled with when I first got in touch with the solution providers. The first thing was realizing that the customer way you do DNA analysis, you consume about $75 per specimen, anywhere from $75 to $80 per specimen using the standard run. Now with the rapid DNA, you are looking upwards of $200. Actually, the lowest we have been able to bring it down is about $175. So I reached out to these guys and said, look, we need to see how to bring the costs down. So they were able to commission, I think, a study. There was a study which was done by the Foresight team in the US from FIU. And they showed that you actually have to have a certain number of specimens running. So the higher the volume, the lower the cost, but up to a certain optimum. It thinks about 100,000 specimens. I think it was around that. I'm trying to access the paper. But that means, and that gave me the idea that we need to deploy our rapid DNA solutions in the 29 regions so that you can get that volume and therefore run the cost down. So if you only have one instrument, you're not going to realize the cost benefit. It will actually be a little bit of a counterintuitive thing to say, oh, let me run it, because somebody will tell you, look, you're using $200, but then for the time you spend less, I think that $200 will be a payback thinking. So my thinking is, if we can get at least the optimum number of instruments in and also run the optimum number of specimens, then maybe we can realize the cost benefits so that we can get the return on investment therein. So as Innocent was saying, that for the police, it makes a lot of sense because you can get those volumes in. The challenge would be if you're running it in the lab and you're using it specifically to run samples, thinking that you're in alternation of the 3,500. So if you're running a private practice, for example, and you're running a private kinship analysis, you'll ask the clients to say, do you want a rapid or do you want the standard way? Then there you can tell your costs so that you can be able to return your costs at that point, thinking about that. But if you're in Ukraine or you are in another area, crisis area, I don't think you'll have enough time to build a lab and stock it with enough scientists. So the cost of $200, that it really makes sense, because for you to get up to speed, you rather leapfrog and get there quickly. I think that's the way to think about it. Thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah, and I mean, somebody's added here, how does the setup cost compare costs of courts when cases get postponed? So obviously they're talking about delays in justice, and we need urgent victim supportive solutions, 100%, which is why this combination of the two and understanding where it's important, it can be driven by the forensic analysts themselves. They know when rapid actually works, and that would be sort of an integrative approach between police and forensic scientists to ensure that happens. And as you say, it's not to replace it. They work together, but in different ways and in different scenarios. Innocent, I know that you also want to add to that, and we're coming to the end. It's towards the end, so any last questions put in the post, but Innocent, can you add anything to that if you'd like with regards to that cost benefit? You must have gone through that same thing.
Sure. So I think the way you look at the cost benefit, I think my colleagues have adequately handled the other side, but I would like just to give a scenario where a lady is traveling from DRC, passes through Congo with 4 kids, and then the authorities in Zambia or transit place are questioning whether that is a human trafficking issue or not, and they have to ascertain the parentage or relationship or kinship in this case. So in the absence of the traditional way and in the absence of rapid DNA analysis, it means that the government have to withdraw the 4 children and start keeping them, okay? Because you have to wait for the processes. You have to wait. And if they have to do a traditional way, they have to communicate to embassies here and there. So it's costly, as opposed to a system where immediately they are in transit, immediately within 5 hours because they are 4 and you are running 1 sample per hour. So you say within 5 hours, you have resolved this case. And there's no inconveniences. The children are not stressed by withdrawing from their parents and put. So when we look at the cost benefits, we have to look at this. And currently in Africa, we don't even cost the movements of investigators when they are investigating. You arrest people, you keep them, you don't know. It takes 1 month for the main lab to tell you these are excluded or included. You have to go. So the cost benefit, I think we have to be very broad when we talk about them. Yes, like Andrew rightly said, you have to lump up any laboratory process to be cost effective. You have to have numbers in terms of samples. But when it comes to processes where investigations are concerned, I think the cost benefit is okay, because you are not paying the salaries. And I know Andrew's estimation, it doesn't, the $75 we are using, normally we don't put in the salaries for our staff because it's government. We don't put in the utilities, we don't put the infrastructure, etc. We're just looking at the analysis itself. So when you look at the cost benefits, rapid DNA is cost effective. You don't need infrastructure. You can move it from point A to point B, doesn't need to be stationed. And you can use the electricity generated by the vehicle in which it is stationed. You don't need a system. So when you look at those and how quickly you are resolving cases, how effective the investigators are moving, because investigators, when they are moving again, that's a cost which will not factor in.
Yes,
So when
thank
you
you.
cut off all those, ultimately you find that it's really very cost effective. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Innocent. And you can see how passionate Innocent gets with regards to it, because he understands. And I know we've got sort of like literally a few minutes left, and thank you for everyone for staying, because I think this is such an important discussion we're having. This is from Dr. Alameti. Hello, Dr. Alameti, wherever you are out there. Dr. Alameti is a wonderful, wonderful human being who many of you may have met, well, seen in our presentation in Nairobi. He is one of the incredible doctors who works at the Pansy Hospital in the DRC with rape survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. We have a project that we're doing at the moment. There he is. And it's a question which is quite interesting, because it's a research pilot that we're doing between the Pansy Hospital and UCT with regards to, you know, identifying perpetrators of these heinous offences. So Dr. Alameti's question is, what is the difference between rapid DNA and classic methods for efficiency? So in that scenario where you've got rape survivors coming into the clinics, some of them have been walking for days and days and days to get assistance. Would rapid DNA work in those circumstances? And maybe Andrew or Innocent, you can answer this. And in that case, you know, would it be applicable, and would it be recommended in a situation like that to use something like rapid DNA? And maybe just one line as to what the difference is between the two. Andrew, maybe start with you, or
Innocent. I just wanted to understand the question a little bit better, because Dr. Almeida is talking about efficacy, making sure that you get the way I understood
both,
it.
Andrew. I think both. I think maybe there is no difference, or there is a difference. And in terms of efficacy, obviously it's timing. But if there's anything in terms of what is the difference between the outcomes, maybe. I mean, if there are any differences, maybe you can just explain.
Okay, I have done the concordance studies for, you know, using our customary stuff, you know, the 3500 and the rapid. When you do the concordance, it's actually spot on.
Okay, so there's no difference.
There's no difference. The only, actually, what happens is, if there is maybe, you have maybe slippage within the primer binding regions, or maybe, you know, the standard, you know, issues we get within short tandem repeat, is that you may have maybe a slippage within the primer binding site, and, you know, things like that. Then you have just maybe an off allele, or maybe something here and there. Those off things that you usually get as PCR artifacts usually do happen also with the rapid. You'll get those PCR artifacts, especially if you maybe especially when you take a buccal swab of somebody who has just had a meal or something, you know, so you get something very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, but the concordance studies, which we have been able to do, you really get, you know, it's spot on right there and then. Now, so the only other thing to think about what you need to think about is if you're going to use it for casework, you cannot just go and take the swab and then put straight. It would be better that you do some lysis, and then you get the lysate onto the swab into the system. There you'll get a better outcome. I don't know if I make sense, Dr. Almeti. You wouldn't get the
we can maybe, Andrew, it might be something that we can do it separately because of time, but I do think it's something, Dr. Alameti, that we could possibly discuss. I think the difficulty with this is that I think the samples that you may be getting are probably going to be mixtures and more complex, and rapid is not necessarily the right technology for that. So doing them in conjunction, maybe doing one rapid and one, especially in a pilot, and doing the other with standard DNA processing can indicate to you if they're getting the same results, then rapid could be used. If they're not getting the same results, then you would say that you would need the standard processing because it just is more sensitive, and probably with complex samples you are able to manually work with them, etc. So maybe it's something we can put in the study, but it's a great question. And I think on that, we're going to have to we're going to be logged off by our organizers. But I think thank you to each of our speakers for your time and your insights. I really do believe that this has been a fantastic discussion. It has been recorded, and I will put it back online. I do think that we could look at a second part, and that was maybe a demonstration of how rapid works. And maybe Andrew or Innocent, if you've got a rapid instrument in your laboratory, maybe we could actually have a demonstration. And as Carl suggested, certainly a sort of an instruction as to how it works. And then thirdly, I think that these questions in terms of the field are really critical. And maybe, in that next sort of part 2 of the Rapid DNA webinar, people can send us advanced questions that we can actually, rather than do a presentation, we can actually answer them, and maybe give some actual case studies, sort of peer-reviewed case studies that can back them up. So thank you everybody who's attended. I don't know if Innocent and Andrew, you want to have one last word to our listeners and our audience out there before we log off.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you, dear listeners, for turning up to engage in this discourse. Vanessa, we look forward to part 2, and hopefully we can do some studies thereof. Thank you to my colleagues, Innocent and Kyle, and for the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you. Innocent?
Thank you very much for having me, and just looking forward to more discussions. And just one more, just to say, I think the sexual crimes, penetrative sexual crimes, is tricky to do casework because you expect to have mixed profile for the vaginal swabs. There,
Yes.
the victim and the perpetrator, so it's difficult. You just have to be cautious unless you do a sample prep where you do differential wash, but still it's very tricky. So I would just advise that sexual crimes, casework, you run through the routine system. Thank you, and good day.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody out there. Watch our social media, watch our Forensic Fridays if you don't already subscribe, where this will be posted. And we'll do a poll probably to see who would be interested in part 2. And if there are any questions to send them on to me. So thanks again. Have a great afternoon. And to Andrew and Innocent, your expertise is fantastic. And Andrew, I'm coming to your lab soon. Innocent, I'm coming back soon to you too. Take care, everybody, and all the best. Bye. And bye-bye, Dr. Alameti. Thank you for your lovely questions.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
It was a good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.